Colin Sheaf began collecting English ceramics when he was only 9 years old and had his first interview with Christie's when he was 13. He went on to organize the biggest art auction of the 1980s called the Nanking Cargo Sale. And now Colin Sheaf is the chairman of Bonhams for the United Kingdom and Asia. Thanks for joining us today, Colin. Where's the biggest demand coming from for Asian art?
Well, Asia, of course, is a big place, and there's a lot of Asian art around. But what we're really involved with here is Chinese art, because all the arts of China are really the most important when one's looking at the arts produced in the Asian region. And the demand for the arts of China comes nowadays more and more from the Chinese themselves in the mainland.
Well, tell me about the different collectors that come to buy this Asian art from you.
Well, there have been a whole variety of different collectors for Chinese art during the 20th century, in fact. Many were in Europe before 1949. But then as China re-emerged, and particularly as Hong Kong and Taiwan re-emerged in the 1990s and the noughties, we find increasingly the biggest buyers in the world for top Chinese art come from the mainland of China and from Taiwan and from Hong Kong.
Well, tell me about the best-selling pieces in the market currently.
The Chinese have a very, very long cultural tradition. They've been producing art for 7,000 years, and they've actually been collecting it and researching it for the last 2,000 years. So it's an extraordinary, long, conservative culture. But what they've always focused on are the jade carvings. Jade plays a more important part in the culture of China than anywhere else in the world. It's a semi-precious stone, not a precious stone, but even so, it has a sort of spiritual quality, which has fascinated the Chinese ever since it was being used in prehistory, in the Neolithic period, 5,000 and 6,000 BC. But they're very proud of their ceramics as well, and so at Bonhams in Hong Kong and in London, we sell a lot of top quality imperial Chinese art. There's a huge demand around the world for the best ceramics, for the best jades, the best lacquer. And the great thing is that Bonhams, we can decide what we want to sell where, because there are different tastes in different parts of the world for different sorts of the best Chinese art.
Well, do buyers tend to purchase more traditional pieces or more contemporary pieces?
The Chinese have always been very conservative in their tastes, and there are two different markets here. One is the market for the more traditional Chinese wares, the things made for use in the imperial court of China in the 12th and the 15th and the 18th century. And then there is a completely different contemporary art market. It runs to a different rhythm. It's a market which is preoccupied with multi-visual material. It's moved nowadays even more into film. But by and large, the market for the top contemporary Chinese art is not actually in China at all.
Well, in terms of prices, how does Asian art compare to other arts around the world?
Well, again, we're really talking about Chinese art. I mean, there's lots of Asian art, and there are some things, for example, in Japanese art, which are very expensive. But in Chinese art, perhaps the most expensive wares are the Imperial Porcelains. We've seen them sold for well over $30 million US.
Wow.
For a piece of 12th century ceramics. Jade carvings are once in a while worth 10 million US. The best jadeite jewellery, the wonderful jewellery that comes from Burma, but the Chinese have always appreciated as for its fantastic, rich, imperial colours. That can be worth 10 or $20 million for a really outstanding piece. And then, of course, one has the things like the set of chairs we sold at Bonhams in London a month ago only. A set of 4 chairs which sold for £5 million, more than any piece of English furniture was ever made in the UK. So for the Chinese, if a thing is really good, the sky to some extent is the limit.
Wow. So, Colin, have you purchased any art lately yourself?
No, I'm very unlucky. I work in an auction house, and I think it's something you can't really do. You can't combine being an auctioneer and also collecting yourself. That's the trouble, really. You have to sort of make a statement that you're very independent in the opinions you're giving. It would be very fun to collect art, but maybe I'll do it in my next incarnation.
Maybe. Thank you so much for joining us, Colin. It was a pleasure having you on our show today.